Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Landor Links, the Green Transport Recovery Series. Thanks firstly to Raleigh UK for having their support today. So we're going to be discussing all things about eCargo bikes in action with a particular focus on case studies in local authorities. But before I kick off, I want to note that this session is going to be recorded, so you'll receive a link to access the recording by email later. My name is Packard. I'm from Momentum Transport Consultancy. I'll be your chair today, and I will later be joined by Mark Searle at Outspoken Cycles, Jane Sherry at London Borough of Waltham Forest, Jenny Pescod at Co-Cars, Co-Bikes, Co-Delivery, and Ed Pegram, Cycle to Work at Raleigh, UK. As chair, it is my job to help develop the discussion and make sure both the speakers and, of course, the listeners can all get out the most that they can today. As we chat, you can send in your questions if you use the side panel. And once we open up for discussion at the end, I'll try and make sure I get as many of them answered as possible. We're all here today to talk about eCargo bikes and their uses in local authorities. We likely come from many different backgrounds, but ultimately we want to learn from case studies so that successes and indeed failures can be learned from and the experience applied to other towns and cities. I work at Momentum Transport Consultancy, and we work very closely with people in the development industry, and it's becoming increasingly clear that there are huge urban constraints such as space, congestion, and these are preventing quite beneficial projects from coming forward. So more and more, we've been looking at how the use of eCargo bikes can ease some of these problems, not only for logistics, but also sometimes to transport people. Before the pandemic, vans were the fastest growing motor vehicle in Britain. Our roads, our cities, they're really screaming out for change now. We absolutely need to reinvent business transport by using eCargo bikes that can not only reduce vehicle congestion, but also enhance air quality, improve road safety, and potentially deliver savings to the businesses that they deliver to as well. There's a very long list of benefits here, which we need to ensure are realised by as many businesses, individuals, and of course, local authorities. But above all, it seems that technology is allowing us to rediscover the benefits of what I call quite a humble vehicle. But on top of this, we have an explosion in online deliveries. The demand for a cleaner and more efficient way to answer this demand is quite clearly needed. But I won't go on any longer. Let's talk about how eCargo bikes are solving problems already, and hopefully we'll all take away some learnings from the webinar this morning to apply in our own work. So firstly, I'm going to hand over to Mark Searle at Outspoken Cycles to kick off the speakers' presentations. Now I know Cambridge is synonymous with cycling and many towns and cities look to them as an example. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing what has been happening in Cambridgeshire in our eCargo bike realms.
Thanks, Grace. Hi there, my name is Mark Searle. I am the General Manager at Outspoken Cycles. We are specialists in cargo bike retail and servicing, and obviously based in Cambridge. We've been appointed as one of the lead suppliers in 3 out of 4 eCargo bike initiatives, which are run by Cambridgeshire County Council and City Council, and funded through the DFT eCargo bike grant. So the first scheme is a try before you buy for families and businesses, which will run by ourselves. The second 2 schemes are residential sharing scheme and a pool eCargo bike scheme, which are spread across 18 bikes. We'll be supplying and maintaining those bikes. I'm going to talk today about ourselves and about the busy cargo bike scene, you could say, in Cambridge, before focusing on the Try Before You Buy initiative and how we hope this will grow cargo bike use in the city and the surrounding area, particularly in businesses. So if we can have the next slide, please. So Outspoken Cycles grew out of the last mile cycle logistics company Outspoken Delivery, which recently rebranded as Zedify, now operates nationally, with Cambridge offices remaining in our building. So Zedify was started in Cambridge in 2005 with just a couple of bikes, but has then grown rapidly alongside the booming Cambridge cargo bike use over the same sort of period of time. So if we can have the next image. So early bikes were non-electric, often converted rickshaws and 2-wheeled smaller cargo bikes, and the cargo bike industry at that point as a whole in many ways was very much in its infancy. And the slide photo you can see is from approximately 10 or so years ago and shows the non-electric cargo bikes lined up at one of our old depots. These days, it would seem almost ludicrous to attempt deliveries on such a large non-electric trike, for instance, as those ones in the foreground. And if we can have the next slide, please. So cargo bikes have always been an integral part of Outspoken Cycles, even as it grew out of Zedify in 2012. We've always used cargo bikes right from the get-go as a primary way to travel to fleet maintenance and doctor bikes within the city. While initially non-electric, we've subsequently switched all bikes to electric, which has really allowed us to travel much further and much quicker to sites, especially when we're traveling with such a heavy mobile workshop load, so for the toolboxes and spares. So you can actually see one of the bikes loaded there on the left with one of our mechanics. We've always, being located in the same building as Zedify, we work very closely and share a lot of knowledge between us, from our specialist retailer knowledge and support that we can offer through to frontline experience of really quite heavy cargo bike usage. So what products really work and what frankly don't. Half of our team are also ex-couriers from Zedify, bringing that first-hand experience over. If we can have the next slide. So we're lucky to be based in Cambridge, which has many features that lend itself to cargo bike use. The city is very flat, relatively small and with a compact centre, and it also has many cycle routes from outside villages right the way into the centre, and obviously it also has a very high use of regular cyclists already. However, conversely, the city is also very congested, especially after the rapid growth of recent years. This has actually always been an advantage for Zedify, whose couriers can use cycle paths, cut across green spaces and so on, and for cargo bike riders more generally, it's actually often more quicker to ride the cargo bike than it is to drive, especially in peak periods. Outspoken Cycles is actually the third specialist cargo bike retailer in the city, which is really an indication of demand, with the first opening in the same year as Zedify in 2005. The current slide actually shows a photo from Cam Cycles Cargo Bike Carnival in 2019, so that's a Cambridge cycling campaign. The photo gives an indication actually of the dominance of family bikes over business bikes at this point in time. Cargo bikes are a common sight throughout the streets on the morning school run, but we are now starting to see a number of local businesses outside of the last mile logistics making best use of cargo bikes. So that might be from bakeries and cafes. We've had gardeners, we've even had specialist laundrettes, so Oxwash are now in Cambridge. We've had window cleaners, carpenters, and even pest control. However, while cargo bikes are relatively common, it is all relative, and there's a huge amount of growth that can be made by overcoming a number of different barriers, especially for businesses, we feel. So if we have the next slide. So the Try Before You Buy scheme will be launched imminently, and we hope it will help overcome many of those barriers and help further grow cargo bike use in the city and beyond. The scheme is comprised of a fleet of 8 bikes, 4 for families in a 50-50 mix of 2 and 3 wheels, as we find people can be very split between which they prefer, and 4 for businesses. So you can actually see on the slide there's one of the business bikes on the left and one of the family bikes on the right. The bikes are a broad mix to accommodate a wide range of needs for businesses, and we find it can be very broad what they're trying to manoeuvre from one location to another. So we've got a Rally Pro bike, Rally Pro Trike XL, and an Urban Arrow flatbed with a box, and a very large Urban Arrow tender with large box. Businesses will be able to try one bike and then switch if they need to test another, allowing for comparison. We hope the scheme will overcome a number of barriers. Awareness is actually really key, just fundamental awareness really. Our experience is people just don't even consider an e-cargo bike as an option over an alternative such as a van, even in Cambridge, particularly if they aren't a cyclist. And we hope that scheme will bring awareness. We'll be attending regular promotional events, so COVID-19 allowing, where we plan to showcase the bikes and get people test riding them. We find there is an assumption that e-cargo bikes are heavy and hard to ride, when in reality, with motors, they're very easy and surprisingly light and actually very manoeuvrable. Riding them firsthand, we find is a great way to rapidly alleviate concerns for businesses and families. We also know that many businesses aren't aware of the potential savings that Grace mentioned. Operational gains as well that come from e-cargo bike use. There's no costly van, there's very low running costs. There's also the ability to widen their recruitment pool to non-drivers. We actually work with regular e-bikes actually with a care company that found that they could open up to a much wider pool of people that otherwise wouldn't be able to do live-in care. And also for those too young to insure in a van as well, that can be a barrier, so you're able to open recruitment that way. Finally, the ability to store and park the bike in a much smaller and cheaper space. So obviously if you're doing something like being a window cleaner, it's much easier to park a cargo bike up than it is to find space for a van in a busy city. For one business customer, he told us that compared to a van, the reduced cost, ease of training and lower running costs had allowed him to make the difficult jump from a sole trader to a team of 2, which he said otherwise he wouldn't have been able to do. Another barrier for businesses and families is cost, and taking the plunge and purchasing when bikes are often only available to trial for a relatively short test period and also cost a high amount of money. So eCargo bikes for families range from approximately £3,000 to £6,000, while a commercial eCargo bike may actually be from £3,000 to £12,000. So really quite a significant cost and something someone has to be sure about before they buy. For the Try Before You Buy scheme, fees will be kept to a minimum and families will be able to borrow bikes for 1 to 2 weeks and businesses for 1 to 2 months. The idea being to give enough time to test different approaches to using the bike, checking it embeds within family routines or within business operations. Clearly, we've been giving businesses much longer. We feel that giving them much longer is because it will be much more complex and require much more time to hone and practice how the bikes may be used, to try different approaches, for instance, try different riders. We want to eliminate doubt. So businesses and families should be able to finish their trial and understand if an eCargo bike works for them, and if so, what kind of bike or bikes they need. A final significant barrier is maintenance. For the scheme, we'll be taking care of any maintenance issues, and the bikes will be fully serviced. A big worry can often be what happens if maintenance issues renders the bikes unrideable. Even just a simple puncture will do that. We offer a collection and return service and mobile mechanic service, which will support the scheme and should help alleviate concerns. We do feel that having servicing support and or maintenance training is really quite integral, especially for businesses where bikes may be doing really quite high mileage. Having one or more local companies that are able to support that is really quite a big help. In terms of starting the scheme, it has unfortunately been delayed, along with the share and pool bike schemes due to COVID-19. However, we have all the bikes. The Try Before You Buy will actually launch very shortly, starting with a test lease to a local bakery. We'll be upgrading from a non-electric cargo bike to a much larger eCargo trike, allowing greater and faster volumes of deliveries. In terms of the wider Cambridge ecology, we're itching to get the scheme running and help both family and eCargo bikes continue to flourish and help the business side to grow and hopefully catch up or even surpass the family side. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. I think it's quite clear that there's quite a lot of power in a battery and people just need to rediscover that, or at least discover it to begin with. I know eCargo bikes can be very intimidating, particularly to families who might be thinking about it as an alternative to perhaps a school run. So the Try Before You Buy scheme would certainly bring a lot of benefit to them. So I'm next going to hand over to Jane Sherry, who's Behaviour Change Project Manager in Highways and Traffic Management at the London Borough of Waltham Forest. No pressure, Jane, but being part of a local authority who's experiencing how cargo bikes can benefit the local community and businesses right now, there's probably a lot of people listening who'll be hanging on your every word so they can take away your learnings and apply it to their schemes.
Thank you, Grace. So, hi, my name is Jane Sherry and I'm the Behaviour Change Project Manager at Waltham Forest Council. I've been working on the Enjoy Waltham Forest programme since it started back in 2014 and now oversee our sustainable transport behaviour change initiatives. Next slide, please. The programme has come on a long way since 2014, from the cycling-focused name of Mini Holland to the much more holistic approach of the Enjoy Waltham Forest programme. The primary aims of the programme were to introduce a network of direct joined-up cycle routes, create safer streets for walking and cycling, encourage more people to travel by foot or by bike, and to achieve a better balance between movement and place. We look to achieve these through 4 key work streams: village schemes, which are now better known as low traffic neighbourhoods, town centre schemes, a cycle route network, and behaviour change initiatives. And our achievements to date are detailed on the slide. Whilst we've introduced a vast array of cycling infrastructure over the past 7 years, we've recognised the importance of providing opportunities and initiatives for people who live, work and study in the borough to experience the benefits of and feel confident using a wide range of bikes, including eCargo bikes. I'm now going to take you on our eCargo bike journey to show you how our cargo bike-based projects have developed over the past 5 years, what our future plans are, and our lessons learned from introducing initiatives such as these. Next slide, please. So we currently have 2 separate fleets of cargo bikes. One set are our community cargo bikes, which we loan out free of charge to residents, businesses and community organisation for short-term trials, and one set which is used for our Z Waltham Forest delivery service in partnership with Zedify. Next slide, please. We started our foray into the world of cargo bikes back in January 2016 when we set up our community cycle loan scheme. Alongside standard bikes, we purchased 4 cargo bikes for the purpose of loaning out free of charge to residents and businesses. These included the Christiania Cargo, which is strong, durable and versatile, perfect for the school run, the Omnium Cargo, which is fast, light and manoeuvrable, perfect for a wide range of business logistics, and 2 fast food bikes, which are light, fast, and easy to store, ideal for encouraging food takeaway delivery businesses to transition from powered two-wheelers to a greener alternative. Demand for this scheme has continued to grow over the past 5 years, and we've since added a further 4 cargo bikes to this fleet, all of which are e-assist. We have a wide range of users, including parents trialling the school run, residents moving house or taking goods to the recycling centre, and community organisations delivering food parcels to people self-isolating during the pandemic. Residents have an induction session showing them how to use the cargo bike and build their confidence. And we also offer regular cargo bike specific training with our cycle training provider, Cycle Confident. Over the past year alone, we've loaned out our cargo bikes for a total of 856 days and currently have a waiting list of 4 months. To reduce this and enable more people to trial using an e-cargo bike as part of their day-to-day lives, we successfully bid to our council's carbon offset fund at the end of last year to purchase a further 2 bikes, and we'll be adding these to our fleet in late spring. Our next major cargo-based project was Christmas Courier back in December 2016. We were successfully awarded £400,000 from the Mayor's Air Quality Fund back in 2016 to set up a green courier delivery service over 3 years to complement the Enjoy programme and support local businesses. The first part of this project was a trial, which we chose to run at Christmas to coincide with an increase in demand for deliveries, and therefore traditionally an increase in vehicles on the road. We used our existing community fleet and purchased an additional 2 cargo bikes, which were more suited to business needs, and engaged with a wide range of businesses in the Waltham town centre area to encourage them to sign up to the trial. We used Cycle Confident to assist with logistics and making deliveries and set up a trailer in Waltham Town Square Gardens, which we used as a base for the bikes and an engagement hub. Deliveries were made free of charge to businesses and customers, which really reduced the barriers to them using the cargo bikes for their deliveries. Over the 2 weeks of the trial, we made over 1,000 deliveries for 22 businesses and cycled over 2,600 kilometres. Next slide, please. The next stage of our Green Courier delivery service was setting up Z Waltham Forest in partnership with Zedify. We started Z in September 2017 with 4 cargo bikes and 3 local businesses who had used the Christmas Courier trial. Operations were based in a railway arch in Leighton, close to many of the borough's SMEs. Businesses are offered £100 of delivery credits or a free delivery trial to encourage them to try out the service. The Z team work closely with clients to provide a delivery solution that meets their exact needs, replacing the use of ICE courier services and private vehicles for deliveries. While some businesses are particularly interested in Z's green credentials, many are more concerned with price and a reliable customer service. The Z fleet contains a range of eCargo bikes which are adaptable to suit the needs of a wide range of businesses. The most used bikes in the fleet are the Urban Arrows, which have a large lockable box which can be removed if required so that the flatbed can be used for bulkier or more awkward-shaped items. The Iceni trikes are also well utilised as their capacity is similar to a small van, and businesses are always really surprised at how much fits in them. Z has now grown to delivering for over 60 local and national businesses, ranging from coffee roasters, bakers, pharmacies and an organic farm to independent newspapers and magazines. The council itself is also utilising Z and has realised the benefits of e-cargo bikes, with the library service using them to deliver books between libraries and to housebound residents, as well as for the transfer of musical instruments for tuition classes and for the delivery of posters, leaflets and other educational tools to our schools. Over the past 3.5 years, Z have made over 98,000 deliveries, cycled over 154,000 kilometres and saved an estimated 35 tonnes of CO2 equivalent emissions. Next slide, please. Over the 3 years of running our community cycle loan scheme, we found that it was really successful, with residents coming back again and again to borrow new models from our cargo bike fleet. However, we were struggling to come up with an affordable solution for them to commit to changing their travel behaviour and owning their own cargo bike. Luckily, at the same time, Pedal My Wheels introduced their Try Before You Bike concept, where anyone who lives, works or studies in the borough can try a standard electric assist, cargo bike or adapted bike for a low interest-free monthly fee. If they choose to keep their bike, they continue to pay this until they've paid off the cost of the bike, or if they decide it's not for them, they can return it with no further commitment. The scheme is a great next step for residents and businesses who want to own their own cargo bike, as an electric assist Bravo Curve is only £150 per month compared to an upfront cost of around £3,000. This makes it a lot more affordable and therefore enables behaviour change away from private vehicle ownership. Next slide, please. It's great that so many residents and businesses now own cargo bikes in Waltham Forest, with barely 5 minutes going by without one pootling past. However, a growing issue that we've had as a result of this is where to securely park and store them. One solution that we're about to trial is using Falco's FalcoPod cargo bike hangers. We'll be introducing 3 of these in the Borough in high street locations for business use. Each bike hanger will contain a pool cargo bike for a small number of businesses to use for their logistics and deliveries, and the bike hanger will have a digital lock-on for easy access. We're currently running a series of engagement sessions with businesses to find out which types of eCargo bikes would suit them best, and once agreed, we'll be looking to start the trial later this spring. Next slide, please. We found that marketing, promotion and engagement have been key to increasing the uptake of eCargo bikes in Waltham Forest. By showcasing a variety of people using a variety of bikes for a variety of purposes, it's meant that more residents and businesses have tried out and adopted cargo bikes than we could have imagined. One of the key things that we found is using photos demonstrating the breadth of items and people that can be transported using cargo bikes. We encourage the users of our community bike loan scheme to send us photos of how they're using our bikes. Some examples here are of residents using the Christiania for the school run, Walthamstow Toy Library using the Omnium for the delivery of a rocking horse, and Zed using an urban arrow to deliver 40 boxes of flowers. These gain great traction on social media and lead people to realising the benefits of eCargo bikes. Next slide, please. We've used a diverse range of sources to fund our eCargo bike projects, namely TfL's Borough Cycling Programme back in 2014 to 2017, the Mayor's Air Quality Fund between 2016 and 2019, and more recently, the Council's own Carbon Offset Fund, which uses Section 106 developer contributions. Whilst the eCargo bikes are the major expense, you do also need to consider insurance costs, particularly with cycle theft being so prevalent over the past year or so. Maintenance costs, as maintenance costs tend to be higher and parts can be harder to source, locks and accessories, and parking solutions. Next slide, please. Next on the eCargo bike agenda for us will be the business cargo bike hanger trials that I mentioned earlier. If these go well, we will look to introduce some similar solutions for residents so they also have somewhere secure and convenient to park their own cargo bikes. We are also building 4 more cycle hubs at stations over the next year, and these will feature enhanced parking for cargo bikes too. Another development that we're looking to focus on includes the options for eCargo bike charging points, either as part of our cycle hubs or as part of our EV charging point network, as range anxiety can be still a major barrier to eCargo bike trial take-up. We'll also be continuing to add to our community cycle fleet to increase the options and opportunities for residents and businesses to trial cargo bikes. And we've recently reappointed Zedify to operate our Zed Waltham Forest service for the next 5 years, showing our commitment to eCargo bikes as one of the key solutions to addressing the climate emergency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jane. That was fantastic. And I think it's great to see some real life examples of how a local authority can really benefit from these eCargo bikes. Some of the numbers that you said there are incredible in the way that if you think about how many vans that they've taken off the road and how many kilometres that we've saved there, it's phenomenal, really. And also you touched upon something which I think is very important, which is parking. And I'm sure we'll come into this in the discussion later. And I know we've already had a couple of questions through about it. And that's a reminder for everybody. If you've got any questions, do pop them in the side chat and we'll try and get to them later. So next, I'm going to ask Jenny Pescod at Co-Cars, Co-Bikes and Co-Delivery in Exeter to take the stage. I know Exeter very well, having attended university there, and I can tell you there are lots of hills, one which we all fondly called Cardiac Hill for obvious reasons. So I can imagine that electric park of the bike is very much needed.
Thanks, Grace. Yes, hello, I'm Jenny Pescod. I'm director at Co-Cars, Co-Bikes, Co-Delivery. I was the founder of Co-Delivery back in 2017, and we joined up with Co-Cars and Co-Bikes. We offer shared on-street electric cars, bikes, and now cargo bikes. We do the delivery at present in Exeter, but also across the southwest. Next. I mean, we all know we've got a problem, right? There's a problem with congestion, particularly in Exeter, but obviously that is a wider part of the wider climate emergency. And transport is a key part of that, our emissions as a country and as a city. So I think the latest estimate is 28% of our carbon emissions. Freight transport and delivery of goods, I think the latest estimate again is about 35% of that. Obviously, within the last year, we've seen tremendous growth in online purchasing and the delivery attached to that. It was growing anyway, and I think the current situation has just had incredible growth in on-demand deliveries and deliveries. And alongside that goes obviously the van traffic that tends to be the mode of choice for delivering these goods. So this is really how I got into it back in 2017. I saw the number of vans on the road where I was living in Exeter at the time, and I just had 2 young children and was starting to think, you know, isn't there a better way of doing this? And cargo bikes just seemed like a very obvious answer that for whatever reason wasn't yet very visible in Exeter. So I dived in. Next slide, please. Exeter is in many ways has many of the same challenges as any city across the UK at the moment. That sort of the change in the high street, meaning and the change in the way that people are shopping is leading to lots of discussions about how to make Exeter city centre a really sort of livable city centre, where it's and co-cars, co-bikes and co-delivery, we like to think ourselves as part of that, you know, that we can create more space for people if we enable them to share assets rather than actually having to buy them themselves. So instead of having to buy an extra car, actually they can use the on-street car club. Instead of using their car to get around town, they can use the shared bikes. And instead of using a van to do deliveries or getting deliveries made by van, they can use cargo bikes for that. Next slide, please. Just a bit of background on Exeter, as Grace kindly said, yeah, it's quite hilly. So this is just a picture of what you might encounter. We regularly encounter as a delivery company deliveries from practically sea level all the way up into that red area up in Pennsylvania, which is quite a residential area. We've got the city centre of Exeter is quite concentrated, just about where it says Exeter there on the slide. So that's where the sort of retail centre is, it's where the rail stations are, it's where a lot of the offices are based. And much of the sort of ring around that is residential. Most of our work actually sort of pre-COVID was more wholesale, so it was often delivering from some of the more industrial businesses down in the sort of blue area towards the bottom. I feel like a weather lady. And then moving that goods from that sort of more industrial area up into the centre of town, into businesses around the centre of town. Been quite a shift, obviously, with COVID, away from wholesale more towards residential. So now we're travelling quite some distance around here and often up and down hills. The population of Exeter is relatively small for a city, but quite sort of densely concentrated around this area and expected to grow quite a bit over the next few years. Over the next sort of decade or so, I think we're expecting another sort of 25,000 residents just within this area. There's also quite a large catchment area, mainly rural, across the rest of Devon, for retailers and commuters into the centre of town, or certainly there was pre-COVID. So the question for us is how to sort of manage some of that, certainly from a transport perspective, and how to use cargo bikes to help some of that. But the hilliness adds a sort of extra dimension where you've got to really, alongside all the other barriers that both Mark and Jane were talking about, the extra hills tend to give people a little extra pause in thinking, do I really want to use a cargo bike for transporting my family or my goods? So part of the case we're trying to make is to showcase what cargo bikes can do, certainly with electric assist and the improvements in battery and motor design that we're seeing, even just in the last 6 months. Certainly it's possible to move some very heavy stuff up some very big hills without hardly breaking a sweat. Next slide, please. So here's just a range of some of our cargo bikes. Like many of the other operators, we have a range of different bikes on screen here. We have some urban arrows, which have already been talked about. At the top, one not yet mentioned, but which you can see on screen, we have a Turner two-wheeler. So it rides much more like an ordinary bike, but it is electric and it has very versatile cargo capacity. So some huge panniers, a large Euro crate-sized rack on the back as well, and a rack on the front if you so require. So it's very flexible. Over to the left there, you can see one of our new additions to the fleet is an Eve quadricycle. So this is, I like to say, a bit more like the sort of white van of the cargo bike, eCargo bike world. It's very much aimed at where it has weather protection. The quadricycle has very usable space in the back, 2 cubic meter capacity. So it's a real workhorse, and it's been a great addition to the fleet, as well as being very eye-catching, obviously. So co-delivery operates, as I said, within Exeter, but we also have another sister company in Salisbury that started up just towards the end of last year. We tend to work with local businesses. We do first and last mile, but it tends to be a lot of sort of only mile between businesses in Exeter and or between businesses and residences in Exeter, which has really been the challenge of the last year, is kind of pivoting more towards home delivery, which we didn't do as much of before COVID, but we're doing a lot of now. Next slide, please. Yeah, just a bit of background. So as I said, we are part of Co-Cars and Co-Bikes. Co-Cars and Co-Bikes are shared on-street electric cars and electric bikes. I won't go through all the detail there, but it's there if you want to see it. Both have been, Co-Cars have been operating the longest sort of as a car club since 2005, and Co-Bikes really been growing just over the last 5 years and growing quite a lot now within Exeter. And there was a share raise last year, so it's expanding again within Exeter and across the southwest over the next few years. Next slide, please. I think this is just a pretty picture of some cars and bikes. And next slide, please. Another pretty picture of some bikes and Exeter Cathedral, but really showcasing, you know, how much more pleasant life can be if you cycle. And then next picture. Next slide, sorry. It shows the network of Co-Cars and Co-Bikes across the southwest. So at the moment we only do delivery within Exeter and Salisbury, but looking to sort of add that to our services across the southwest, as well as considering as well how we can offer on-street shared electric cargo bikes as well, which I know both Cambridge and Waltham were talking about, and how we can make that easy for people as well. At the moment, our electric bikes are provided much like a sort of Boris bike scheme by Nextbike, and seeing whether we can integrate electric cargo bikes into that. I think we'll be looking at working out over the next year or so. Next slide, please. Just a bit of background on the recent grant. We applied with Devon County Council for a grant from the Energy Saving Trust earlier last year. We went into this with a range of partners across the city to sort of showcase the electric cargo bike potential across the city, and also aiming to build capacity around cargo bikes, particularly around maintenance and servicing of cargo bikes, which, as others have said, is different. So we have a range of different use cases. We wanted to show that it's not just about delivery, that actually there are services that can benefit from electric cargo bikes too. So the City Council are using it for environmental health inspections if they need to go out, County Council, parking enforcement. The NHS want to use it for their community nursing teams if they need to go out in the field, and the university into campus. We, as co-delivery, wanted to expand our fleet to offer a sort of wider range of different styles of cargo bike, depending on appropriate to whatever we're delivering. And so we ended up with a combined procurement of 13 bikes, so 2 IC trikes, which again have been mentioned by others, one of which is being used in environmental health inspections, and the other is for us. The Eve quadricycle, which we saw a picture of earlier, which again is for us in our deliveries. An urban arrow, which we've added to the fleet, a bullet, which is kind of similar, slightly smaller than the urban arrow, and then 8 turns. So these are very much, as I said, those kind of two-wheelers that ride very much like a normal bike. Easier we're using these for the community health nursing teams and for sort of parking enforcement, where the training required to operate these is much easier. It's easier for people to get a grip on how to work these bikes. And so for teams where there's perhaps a range of different individuals all going to be using the bike, it's easier for them to get to grips with without feeling like some individuals do seem to find some of the bikes with a load on the front more difficult. So I think the two-wheeler turn will be better for them. So we've acquired all the bikes. Some of the implementation of this with some of the use cases has been slightly delayed because of COVID, but all kicking off this spring with, for example, the NHS. Next slide, please. I think there's a lot of challenges and opportunities for us around cargo bikes in Exeter and elsewhere. As I mentioned earlier, the city centre retail is changing quite a lot, and that's certainly affected our service and what kind of requirements are put on us as a delivery service. At the moment, we're seeing a lot more requirements for home deliveries from the companies that we work with in town, and I think for a lot of those retailers in town, perhaps they're expecting footfall to decrease even after things open up again. It seems likely that there'll be more focus on sort of experiences within the city centre, and we need to think about how to use electric cargo bikes perhaps to enhance people's experience of getting into town or getting out if they are shopping in town. I think the lockdown has certainly had an impact on the nature of the city centre and the mix of people in the city centre. So it's not just retail, but there used to be quite a heavy sort of professional services and office-based office workers in the centre of town. And I think we're already seeing that lots of those offices may not be in the centre of town in the way that they have been to this point. So there won't necessarily be that kind of there won't be all those people commuting into the centre of town, which is great. So it means that the cycle infrastructure is improving, and the county council is putting a lot of work into trialling road closures and turning certain roads into cycle routes only, which is really good. But it is going to change the nature of the sort of shopping experience in the centre of town, and that will have knock-on effects in terms of our business, particularly around wholesale and the hospitality experience. Potentially, if we can improve the experience in the centre of town for people coming in, that could be a win, but it's just a change at the moment. We're looking into integrated ticketing for private transport so that people can move seamlessly from the bus or the train to a cargo bike to a shared electric car without necessarily having to book separately each time, which I think could be exciting for us. In terms of the delivery side of things, we're seeing opportunities opening up around multimodal freight, so around bringing freight into the city by rail, so avoiding that need to transport by truck. And then in terms of on-demand, obviously on-demand shopping is up and deliveries are up in general, but I think it's not always that immediate boon for delivery companies like ourselves, because a lot of that legacy technology in the parcel companies makes it difficult for independent companies to break in, and it's kind of hard for the parcel companies to consolidate for a city centre. So we're still working on some of that, but I think hopefully if we can overcome some of those barriers, that should be growth there as well. Final slide. Just in terms of what local authorities can be doing, a lot of that was mentioned by Jane and Mark, but just one thing I wanted to add is that we're seeing quite a lot of interest from developers, housing developers, who want to include shared assets within their developments. So whether that be cars, bikes or cargo bikes, and we're finding that that can be a quicker way to get things implemented rather than sort of doing it after developments are in place. Yeah, we're certainly seeing a lot of interest from developers as part of their planning and putting sort of schemes together. That's kind of it from me, I think.
Thank you, Jenny. I think it's fantastic to see the growth which is happening across the south and the southwest as well. And also you brought up quite a lot of both opportunities and challenges, which I know we've had a lot of questions about, so we'll pick up on those later. Before we move into the discussion, we're going to hear from Ed Pegram now, business manager at Cycle to Work of Raleigh UK, who I'm sure will be able to tell us about the huge growth, not only in e-bikes, but also e-cargo bikes, and how they can benefit local businesses.
Thanks, Grace. Yeah, good morning. So really what I want to do today is talk briefly about the products themselves. I know there's been a lot of discussions, great discussions with regards to how cargo bikes can benefit individuals, families, businesses, and certainly local authorities. But what I wanted to do is give you a perspective from a manufacturer of the products and talk about some of the trials that I myself and Raleigh have been fortunate enough to be part of. Next slide, please. So really, fundamentally, the cargo bike isn't new technology. It's something that's been around for hundreds of years. They are a really versatile means of transport. They work really well in dense urban areas. They're great for transporting people, goods, equipment, all sorts of different things, even pets. So you can see that one there, that's our sister company Baboo pictured there, which is an interesting one. So really they're really versatile. I think one of the key things is the electrification of the cargo bike. That's one of the biggest things that's changed over the last, particularly the last 5 years. If you take Europe, for example, previously around 50% of the sales of cargo bike were electric, were standard. We're seeing that shift now to a 60-40 split, more skewed towards electric cargo bikes, which is interesting. And it was touched on previously, but the development of the batteries and the motors and the efficiency, if you take our bikes, for example, they can go around 40 miles on a single charge of one battery. We're also in the process of developing a double battery bike, so a range of around 80 miles on a single charge is quite significant compared to where we were 5 years ago. It also means that the load and the different types of items that we can transport by cargo bike has really changed. You can see it on the bottom right there, one of the cargo tracks that's rear mounted. The capacity of that is around 250 kilos, so significantly different to where we were. So it's really the electrification has driven a big change in cargo bikes. And I think fundamentally the 3 points we always push is that cargo bikes are efficient, cost effective, and obviously they have huge environmental impact when compared to either a commercial vehicle or a traditional car, petrol or diesel. Next slide, please. So really just to touch briefly on the benefits, you can see there, this is some cost analysis that we have done along with Nottingham City Council. So hopefully you're aware, Raleigh is based in Nottingham, and we've partnered with Nottingham City Council on various projects, including e-bikes and eCargo, and they are about to roll out a try before you buy scheme with 15 bikes. So we're working closely with them to see how that impacts the city. Their initial motivation was Nottingham is part of the Clean Air Zone initiative. So Nottingham as a city is very small. It's only about 4 miles across, making it perfect for cargo bikes. There's also a workplace parking levy. So if you're driving into the city, for individuals, it can be quite expensive, and certainly businesses, when the Clean Air Zone comes into place, it's not going to be very efficient to be driving a traditional commercial vehicle in and around the city making deliveries. And I think because it's so small, it can be quite packed, and congestion is an issue. Some research we've done is that average speed within the city at peak times is around 9 miles an hour. So actually cargo bikes can be more efficient in that, particularly that dense urban area. So like I said, the efficiency of the trips, particularly because most cargo bikes can travel down cycle lanes, and it's important to consider that most cargo bikes are less than 1 meter wide. So actually in terms of the space, the road space they take up, they're pretty inoffensive. It's not much more than a normal bicycle, and it makes them easy to transport smaller items in particular in towns and cities. So there's beyond the use of them, there's the user themselves. I think it's really important to consider how they are affected, particularly in terms of the weather that we have in the UK. It can be pretty poor a lot of the time, but equally we get some good months. So the health and well-being of them is really important to consider. We were on a trial with TfL a couple of weeks ago, and it actually rained, and you'll see the picture at the end of the slides here. But you know, the well-being of that individual is really important to consider. Cargo bikes without weather shielding are great when the weather is good, particularly because they're not sat in traffic. They're out and they're cycling and reaping the health benefits of that. But when the weather is bad, there's certainly that to consider. Next slide, please. So pictured here is an example of a trial that we did with some construction businesses and TfL in the city. So there's a group of construction businesses that include Structure Tone, Mace, and Sir Robert McAlpine. They were conducting around 2 to 3 trips a day per business, so there's about 4 businesses. They were hiring a small commercial vehicle or using one of their own, and the idea was they would use the vans to collect paint, it's shown in the example, do lunch runs, collect plumbing supplies, small fixings. So per business, around 2 to 3 deliveries a day were done that are less than 2 miles, and it's pretty inefficient, pretty costly as well to each business. So they anticipate that around 4,000 miles worth of journeys could be switched to cargo bike, and hence the trial. The point there is that they had large commercial vehicles doing very short runs in the city, that these are petrol or diesel vehicles, and they were carrying items that were less than 50 kilos, so easily capable to be done by cargo bike. And not only did they have the cost of the vehicles on top of that, but they had the cost of the congestion zone, parking that vehicle. They run the risk of fines if they were parking the vehicle outside wherever they were picking up from. So all round, I think it's important to consider that cargo bikes have a place. They're not going to solve all of the issues, but certainly it's about getting them out there, getting the awareness of the products, and seeing how they could fit into businesses with trials at low risk. I think that's the thing. I myself have been part of a number of trials now, around 30 trials, and it's interesting when you turn up to businesses and you present the bike, and generally speaking, there's a bit of uncertainty until they're either used or ridden, and then there's this light bulb moment. And yeah, I'm pleased to say that in a lot of trials, the bikes have been really successful. So just speaking generally here, most cargo bikes are either 2 or 3 wheels, although there was a quadricycle pictured in the last one. They have a range of about 40 miles on a single charge with a single battery. Like I said, that would double if there's double battery options. They can be front or rear loading. We're predominantly focused on business bikes, but generally speaking, they're either enclosed lockable case cargo bikes or open case, and they're able to take people or goods and equipment. Most are less than 1 meter wide, and that they work best in dense urban areas. Next slide, please. So really just to demonstrate how versatile they actually are, like I said, with the previous slide showed how they could be used in construction with delivery of paint, plumbing, fixings, all sorts of different things. This is a great example of how they can be used to transport perishable goods. So pictured there is Damien from the Arc Centre in Islington, and Damien's had one of our cargo trikes for around a month now. He's done around 2,000 miles on it, and he delivers to 70 households of around 200 people 2 to 3 deliveries a day. And really, this was driven by the fact that Islington has lots of streets that are pedestrian or cycle only. And so for them, delivering by either car or commercial vehicle just wasn't efficient. A 40-minute journey that would have been by a van now takes them around 20 minutes by cargo bike and costs them significantly less. So I think that's just a great example of how this sort of cargo bike uses can be really varied, and different loads and capacities and styles. The bike picture there is much smaller, much more nimble, a bit faster, but the trike in the bottom right can obviously carry up to 900 litres, so much greater capacity, and 100 kilos in weight. Like I said, some cargo bike can take up to 250 kilos. So really, this is about finding or trialing the right cargo bike for different situations. So the trike there works really well for the food bank, the bike worked well for the construction businesses. There are flatbed options, there are open top options. I think it's really important to consider there is a huge range of products available, and they all ride differently and all require varying levels of what we would like to call basic training prior to them being used. So it's really important to consider the type of use that the cargo bike would be doing to maximise the potential. Next slide, please. And again, just to share some considerations based on the trial. So this is the picture that I really liked from the day with TfL in London and the construction businesses. You can see they're completely segregated cycle lane, which is great. The operatives felt really secure in this scenario. The other side of Southwark Bridge, you have to cross quite a busy road. You go on to some pavement, which is still a cycle lane, and then cross another busy road. That can be quite daunting. So I think from our perspective, the difference between users that had formal training and that didn't was quite vast. And we would always recommend, particularly with the sort of larger, what they call long john type cargo bikes, at least a basic form of training prior to use. It's better for everyone. It's better for the user. It's better for other road users as well, because I think while cargo bikes are great and absolutely have their place, I think we need to be mindful that this is change. And I think with any change, we need to do it. We need to implement it in a sustainable way. So absolutely, training is really important. Security has come up a couple of times. Most projects that I've worked on, the local authorities have asked for the bikes to be tracked or have some form of tracking, which is really vital for security, but also doubles as feedback, so you can get information about heat mapping, where the bikes are being used most, route planning as well. Like you can see in the picture, this is actually a cycle superhighway in London, which is great, but there certainly are going to be roads where perhaps a cargo bike perhaps might not be best suited. So route planning is also really important, and the feedback from that. And I touched on user welfare and training, and again, how the cargo bikes will be used is really important, because like I said, there's lots of different types, lots of different styles of cargo bikes. So it's about picking the product that's right for you. And I think it's clear from the presentations that we've had that these try before you buy schemes or short-term loans are absolutely the way forward to introduce cargo bikes sustainably. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you also for addressing the fact that we live in the UK and it does rain. We'd had quite a lot of comments come through on the chat about how many pictures were in fine weather. And yes, the sun does shine, but it also rains. And as a cyclist myself, I know that it can rain quite a lot and catch you off guard. So thank you. We'll move away to the discussion now. There's obviously a lot to take away from those talks. And I know it's very refreshing to hear about case studies about something, well, a mode which people still see as a rarity, perhaps because they don't see it on their streets yet. But of course, we're all here to try and change that. So if all of our panelists can put their cameras back on, we'll open the discussion so we can dive a little deeper into some of the topics that have been touched upon today. And I'm going to start off with a very broad question, and don't all jump at once, but one of the questions we've had come through is, if there's a small local authority who doesn't have any grants but would really like to implement an eCargo bike scheme, how should they start? Who would like to take that one? Don't all rush at once.
Go on, I'll take that one. So
thanks,
a huge amount of my time is spent organising trials of cargo bikes. I think it's really important that we find ways of working with local authorities and businesses in a really risk-free, low-cost way. And we actually operate a free trial scheme, so we can supply bikes or trikes with no obligation for a period of time. And I think the only way to introduce them, you know, sustainably is for them to be trialed before use.
Absolutely, that's something that a couple of you did touch upon today, this whole try before you buy, and it seems that there's more and more schemes coming forward to help with that. I know, Jane, you said that that was something that you're hoping to implement in the not too distant future, is that right?
Yep, so we already have a try before you bike scheme with Ped on My Wheels that we started last year, as we found that with our community cycle loans, we had people borrowing bikes from us on multiple occasions, which is great, but they weren't really able to take the next step to get their own cargo bike, as we've discussed with the affordability barrier. So the try before you bike has been a great place to point people to as the next step.
Excellent. I will move on to a question that I know. Sorry, go for it, Jenny.
I just wanted to add to that I know some of the bike manufacturers have also started doing lease schemes, which make it a little bit easier for people to independently, or organisations independently, to lease a bike for a shorter period of time than if you were having to shell out for a purchase. So that can be an option as well, increasingly.
Yeah. Yes, Mark.
It's also worth mentioning cycle to work schemes, which of the upper cap has been lifted now. So actually you can go right the way up to those high end prices if you need to, provided you find a retailer that's happy to do that. Then you can at least spread the payments and get the tax-free benefits from that as well. And there are also commercial finances companies out there that can help smaller businesses as well. So we've worked with them in the past, which can spread the costs as well, which aren't obviously available for the cycle to work scheme.
That's the thing, isn't it? I think it's about knowing who to go to and pulling down those barriers before people even start. So knowing exactly what companies to go to, what they're going to be asking for if they just pick up the phone, so that they can say, hi, I just want to try out some bikes, and making sure that there are incentives for people to do that. And that's why knowledge sharing sessions such as these webinars are fantastic, because I mean, I don't know how many people are listening from local authorities across the UK now, but they now know that that is available to them. So let's try and get that out there and show them what can come about from that, be that in Exeter or Waltham Forest or even London, across the UK. There's some real opportunities out there once people see the power of these small batteries that go onto what looks like just your typical cargo bike. Another question which I think is quite important, and I think something which will help develop the eCargo bike presence in towns, cities, even villages in the future, is infrastructure. So particularly on the street, how can we look to allow for more eCargo bikes to be used, which ensures their safety for not only the riders, but also pedestrians as well. We have a lot of cycle lanes and cycle tracks up and down the UK, but I think a lot of people are concerned about the width of some of these vehicles, particularly the tricycles and the ones with four wheels as well. So what I'd like something from each of you. What do you think we can do first of all to try and enhance the infrastructure to allow these eCargo bikes to be used more widely? Jenny, can I start with you?
We can use roads instead. Because I think some local authorities are starting to do this, because it prompted a lot by COVID, I think. But actually closing some smaller roads to vehicles to cars and vans, and using them for bikes makes it a lot easier for cargo bikes as well. So I think, as you say, a lot of the existing cycle infrastructure often has barriers in that I know from experience we can get stuck in. And it's often quite hard to change the existing infrastructure. So I think if it is at all possible, just use roads that perhaps make it easier to make road circulation one way or whatever, and turn roads into cycle lanes. That makes it easier for cargo bikes too.
Mark?
I'd say, as I mentioned in my talk, Cambridge is fortunate. It has some very good routes that are completely traffic-free straight away into the centre of Cambridge. There's a couple of busways, for instance, and that definitely helps because you can shortcut any of the busy arteries into a city. So having those routes has been really helpful. So I think maybe looking at those wherever it's possible, and obviously looking at the width side of it, as you've mentioned, and Ed, you've said most cargo bikes are inside of a metre, which is still quite doable, but I know certainly from ourselves with our trike that we've got, that's about 1.2 metres. It's a converted rickshaw, so there can be some route planning issues there that we have to always work out. So I think it's making wide and segregated routes is a real help just to get straight into the centre, and from there negotiating roads.
Absolutely. It starts to become maybe a controversial topic when we're starting to reallocate road space, but ultimately, if we provide more eCargo bikes, which are, for deliveries, for example, we're removing the vehicles off the road. So it's finding that balance, isn't it? I think that's the key thing. Yes, Mark.
It's also worth how you compare it, because if you're comparing a cargo bike to an ordinary bike, they look really wide. If you go the other way and compare them from a van down, then they look really narrow. And I think it's about that message and saying, well, actually, would you rather one of these parked on the pavement or on the side of the road, or would you rather a white van that's going to be there and maybe obstructing traffic in a way that a smaller cargo bike certainly wouldn't do? So I think it's about that messaging as well, and which way we talk about it.
And I know something that I've come across previously, which is about the capacity or how full white vans actually are when they're on the roads. I cannot remember the stat off the top of my head, but it was very, very low, perhaps the 30% full, which is crazy to think about. These vans which are driving around, which don't actually need to be vans. Perhaps everything could go into an eCargo bike. Jane, do you have any thoughts?
I think just sort of touching on what Jenny and Mark had already said. So when we're introducing our cycle infrastructure, we make sure that when we're designing it, that it's wide enough for an eCargo bike, so that we're not having to go back and retrofit or change the road again in the future. Also making sure that there's enough space in modal filters in low traffic neighbourhoods for cargo bikes to pass through easily, and upgrading any modal filters or emergency service access gates, which were traditionally made quite narrow, so it's even a struggle to walk through, and upgrading those just to make sure there's more space for those as well.
Absolutely, space is key, and unfortunately it's not something that we have all the time, but a bit of jiggery pokery I think can always help. Ed, any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to pick up on your point there about commercial vehicles, if you take where we are, we're quite rural. We live in a quite rural part of Essex, and we have a huge number of vans that must be 4 meters long and really high, and you see them stacked probably 10-25% full, but it's across the whole van. And I think, using the example of a project that we've been fortunate enough to be part of in London is a dairy called Jones Brothers, who are just on the outsides of the city. They do deliveries into the city, into the square mile. And actually, there's a number of buildings that are not accepting delivery by a commercial vehicle now. And so what they're doing is they're using the large vehicles, filling them and using them as sort of out of town sorting hubs to then be transferred to cargo bikes for them to do the last mile delivery. So there's no permanent facilities needed. It's simply a project between the council, that is the Borough of the City of London, where they've repurposed car parks. So this is separate to kind of the infrastructure of the roads. Actually, what they've done is managed to take a huge amount of commercial vehicles out of off the streets of the square mile and been replaced by either people on foot or people on bikes. And I think it's a great initiative, and reduces congestion, reduces emissions in the city, and just one great example of how different industries and different logistical partners have worked together. And I know, Mark, you'll have a great experience of this with Zedify, and I know that's how it works in Cambridge.
Yeah, very much so. So these days we're based just on the north side of Cambridge, right on the outskirts, and Zedify, so our sister company, operate in very much that way. So they'll get larger deliveries, so there might be much larger trucks that will come in, drop off the parcels, and from that point they're sorted and then allocated across different areas and different bikes, and then the couriers will go out and distribute them. And then it's, rather than one truck going all the way around or numerous trucks going all the way around, there's actually bikes going all around the city, and it's actually very accessible that way, and it's actually often very much quicker as well.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And I wanted to ask as well, do any of you have any experience with transferring goods from a vehicle which might not necessarily be a van? It could be a train, for example, or even making use of a river. I know in London that I think it was FM Conway used some of their eCargo bikes to deliver materials to their sites around London, and I think DHL made use of their riverboat service as well. So I think one of the questions is, how do we prevent there being a lot of vans outside of these cities and further afield as well? Lots of nodding.
Go on, I'll pick that up. So interesting, and I think this is absolutely about collaboration, and I think it's a collaboration between any kind of logistics. So Jenny, I saw on one of your slides there that there was a clear link between the city's placement of your hires and railway stations. And I think if we look at the impact of COVID and the way that things have changed with, you know, the huge growth of e-commerce, and actually the different changes in working patterns for many individuals, if you take Raleigh as a business, you know, we're never really going to go back to the way we worked previously. We'll have that option of flexible working. There'll be people that permanently work from home. So I think the repurposing of car parks, the repurposing of space on trains, there's lots of different industries that need to work together to maximise that potential.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, we don't have any direct experience of that multimodal kind of use of trains, for example, yet, but we're certainly seeing increased interest in it and increased inquiries about it now, which is exciting, and hopefully something will be kicking off within not too long. And I think that has a lot of potential across a whole range of different freight. You know, I heard of someone who was doing, you know, fresh fish deliveries from the southwest up into London by train. You know, why not? And medical deliveries is another possible one. But yeah, online shopping as well. If things are currently being delivered by road, actually, and there are trains going every hour from London to Exeter, maybe that'll be quicker. But I think it does come back to that change that's required, because obviously we're not currently set up for that, and the trains aren't currently set up for that, and it'll be, you know, maybe we were once, but how do we get that sort of rolling stock back in action and facilitate at the railway station and a kind of smooth and efficient transfer? Nothing that can't be overcome, I'm sure, but just a sort of change for everyone.
I think it's quite interesting, isn't it? I always see bikes and the use of eCargo bikes and e-bikes as a very modern version of how things used to be done. So if we think back, you know, maybe a couple of 100 years, things would be delivered to a city by boat, and then somebody would put it in the front of their bike and cycle away and deliver it to the local baker or something. This shows how things have come back around again, but have been significantly enhanced by the use of battery technology and also application development. So we can order a delivery on our phone and click eCargo bike, because we know that we're located, you know, not too far away from the supplier, and it can arrive. So it's, this technology has really benefited this very, very humble mode, I think, which is very exciting to see. And also it's a very human way of delivering something. You're not waving to somebody in a huge big van who, you know, just drops down a parcel at your front door or at your shop and then runs away and drives off to the next one. It's more of a human way, and you get a little bit more interaction that way, which is fantastic. And that human interaction is definitely something we're all craving a little bit more after the last year. So I think if we think a little bit about retailers and why at the moment the use of eCargo bikes isn't as widely spread as it perhaps should be, what do you think are the main reasons for reluctance to uptake these schemes, and how can we overcome those problems? Jane, have you come across any particular reluctances?
So as part of the engagement that we've been doing as part of our digital bike hanger trial with businesses, we've been doing quite a lot of engagement about how businesses are currently doing their deliveries and how they would like to in the future. And we found that quite a lot of them are very on board for using eCargo bikes for their deliveries. They really understand the financial and sustainable benefits of it, but they don't find that owning their own cargo bike would be efficient for them. It's quite an expensive outlay. Although there are higher options available, they might not have space in their shops, they might not have the employees available to do the deliveries themselves. So that's why we've come up with our solution of the pool cargo bike for a series of businesses. So sort of 6 or 7 businesses on a high street might then share the cargo bike. And that seems to be a solution that a lot of them are really in favour of, because they can share it all out. They were then either going to contribute to having like a pool rider, or some of them were going to share the deliveries. So if someone was going to Leighton, then they would ask the other businesses, do you have any deliveries for Leighton as well? And they were going to share it out like that, which is a really good solution.
Yeah, it's this sharing concept, which I think we all live in a relatively individualistic society. So let's make sure that we all keep talking, we keep collaborating, and a lot of efficiency can come out of just talking to each other, I feel. Does anyone else want to add anything? Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, just on sort of local retail, I think, as Jane says, there's quite a lot of local appetite in Exeter as well for using eco-friendly delivery companies where it makes sense and where people can. I think, as Jane says, it's just about finding something that people can work with. I think I'm quite interested though in the sort of national and the on-demand deliveries and how you sort of make the deliveries coming into a city green, and then green at the point of the last mile as well, because I think it's an area where perhaps end customers don't have a lot of visibility of how their packages are going to be delivered when they're delivered to them, and if they do, they don't necessarily have a lot of choice either. You know, you don't, if you're buying something online, you don't really get to choose. You know, as you said, it would be nice if people could say, I want this to arrive by electric cargo bike, but you don't have that option at the minute. And it tends to be the retailers who are putting in place the relationships with the parcel carriers, and each parcel carrier has its own kind of thread all the way through to the last mile. It would be quite interesting to see whether there's any way to get sort of end customers able to define actually for the last mile, when it comes into the city, I want it to be by electric cargo bike, but there isn't a lot of opportunity for that at the moment. But it'd be quite interesting if people, unless, you know, it's the world of sort of DPD, I know in certain areas do use cargo bikes, DHL in certain areas use their own cargo bikes, but that sort of, they can do that because they have a lot of demand in particular areas and because there's high density of drops. It'd be quite interesting to see whether for sort of smaller cities or smaller towns, whether something can be delivered that could consolidate those deliveries.
And I think that's a key question for everyone. Sorry, Mark, you go first.
Thank you. So I was just going to mention, in Cambridge we have a service called Click It Local, which is spreading further afield as well, set up at the beginning of the pandemic, which works with Zedify and uses them as a delivery partner. And local small independent shops use them, so they can put on live produce. It might be a bakery, it could even be a butcher, it could be a lot of restaurants are using it. It seems it was quite, in some ways, slow to start, but it's got a huge number of retailers on there now, and I don't particularly know what. I think it's a snowballing effect, but all of it's obviously delivered sustainably within Cambridge, and it's a minimal fee to be able to do it. And I think it's about £3 or £4 plus an extra £1 for every other shop that you add in. I don't know in terms of why retailers would take it up as opposed to not. I think there's a sense that it's very strongly identified with local, which I think is very good and independent. But at the same time, I think it's gained enough momentum. So I don't know whether it's something about thinking about how that momentum can start so that people become aware of it. You know, it's self-perpetuating in many respects, and so it's gained. But it's worked really well with local retailers, getting them on board with those types of deliveries, and fresh deliveries. Often it's next day or same day in some cases.
Mm-hmm. That leads me very nicely onto what I was going to say, actually. I think the big question on a lot of people's minds is, how do we transfer relatively smaller schemes towards much wider implementation? And like you said, it's very upward growth from the beginning, because you've got e-cargo bikes out there and suddenly everybody recognizes them. And there's something which reminds them, oh yes, perhaps I could use that in this element of my life. The more people see something, the more it's a little bit ingrained. So hopefully it's a very steep upward curve from the get-go. And once that initial smaller scheme becomes successful, then it can just continue growing. And hopefully we see this also happening in rural areas as well. So villages working with other villages, and perhaps the distances are a little bit difficult, but that's why we have the E aspect of the cargo bikes to help us there. I have somebody sent through a question directly for you, Mark, and I think it's because you mentioned right at the beginning, we need to eliminate doubt. And so with regards to school runs, what would you say to parents that are a little bit concerned about the safety aspect of using an e-cargo bike to transport their young children to nursery or school, for example?
I mean, firstly, I'd probably ask them for a bit more information with the particular aspects of safety. Is it the handling of the bike, or is it actually the roads they've got to ride on? If it was the roads, I would look at something like dedicated cargo bike training. So our sister company, Outspoken Training, deliver it. It's 2 hours and it's bespoke. So they will go through those difficult junctions. And that can really be a really good way of removing those barriers. I haven't been through it myself. In fact, if there's something where you're like, well, how would I handle the bike here? What's best to do that? I'd also look at route planning as well, which I think others have mentioned, and see if there are quieter streets. It might be that as a driver, they see the really busy roads, they don't actually step off those and go into the side streets and realize how those can actually help be a much nicer way to ride. Yeah, and then in terms of the bike itself, it would be, I mentioned 2 wheels and 3 wheels as a split. We find that existing riders often will gravitate towards 2-wheel bikes because they ride much more naturally. Whereas if you find people are unsure, then 3 wheels are very stable, because obviously you can stop pedaling and come to a standstill. So I'd start to look at those sides and start to talk to the person, find out what those issues were, and potentially look at either that's training on the bikes themselves, or looking at routes, or looking at a dedicated cargo bike training, which I think is a massive help and actually quite cost effective. When you look at, say, a cost, we're saying cheapest e-cargo bike for a family is about £3,000. The training side might be £50. And when you see it in that context, and it's kind of a no-brainer in many ways, even if you're very experienced, it's like, well, why not tack that on and really get some really useful feedback in terms of how you can use the bike best. Really.
Absolutely, and this is where that try before you buy comes in, doesn't it? Ed?
I was just going to say, it's listening to Mark there, it's no different to lessons in a car and passing your driving test. You know, we've done that for many years in a very structured way, and I think it's great that there's training available, because it's really important that we introduce cargo sustainably and make sure it's future proof.
Fantastic. I think, again, something which leads me on to that, I'm thinking about personal use of e-cargo bikes. And one of the questions that has come through is about trips to the local supermarket, which is obviously a huge generator of car trips. At the moment, supermarkets, they always have a massive car park, dependent on where you are, but normally they have a massive car park. And it's only very recently that we've seen more supermarkets bring in cycle parking, but not necessarily for cargo bikes or e-cargo bikes. So what are your thoughts on how supermarkets should try and really persuade their shoppers that there's absolutely no need for them to get in their cars for a 2-mile trip down the road? What do they need to do? Yes, Mark.
I think a really simple one. There's obviously very practical things, but actually just being open to that and advertising the fact that they are open to shoppers coming in that way and that they're supportive of it, regardless of what measures they do. I think that shows an inclusivity, and it shows that it's not you're not an outlier showing up in your cargo bike. You shouldn't feel like, oh, I'm not there in my big car. I think that's actually probably not realised, but it's quite a big barrier, I think, in many respects. And then there's obviously the practical measures about wider space bike racks, for instance. Obviously having enough bike racks, but then if you've got a cargo bike and you're trying to fit it in there, it could be a challenge, especially if you've got one of the wide ones. But even with a two-wheeler, if someone else has got if there are lots of bikes in there, then it doesn't take much before you can't put your cargo bike in. So I think even that practical approach, I think, is worth doing as well.
And I think, Ed, you showed a picture of a cargo bike. Did it have a sort of refrigerated aspect? Did I see that at all? You know, if somebody's wanting to transport their frozen peas to home, are they going to be frozen by the time they get home?
No more so than if they're travelling in a car. No, not at the minute, but it's definitely something that we're looking into. So thermal or insulated cases is something that we're definitely exploring. And again, it comes back to finding the right product for the right use. It's so important. You know, there's been lots of brands mentioned and lots of different bikes, so it's about getting the business to trial the variations in cargo bikes to find something that's suited to the requirement.
Yeah. And Jenny, that was actually something that you showed, that there's so many different types of bikes for businesses, and I think that's what many people who have thought about eCargo bikes, is that one doesn't fit all. Businesses have many different requirements, many different loads, sizes, weights, and there are different eCargo bikes that can suit those purposes.
Sorry, I just lost my mute button. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different types and different, you have to get up to speed with, you know, the different motor specs. I mean, the different torque on different bikes for different hilly requirements or not, and different load carrying. Different bikes may carry the same, in theory, the same weight, but carry it in different ways. And so you have to think about, you know, where cargo might go but I mean, the great news is that there are so many more bikes being developed, even than when we set up Co-Delivery back in 2017. You know, the range of bikes and the range of companies that getting into developing cargo bikes is growing very rapidly, and you're starting to see more of the car manufacturers even start turning towards electric cargo bikes, using some of the same technology. And I think and probably that's you know, a bit more competition for Ed, but at the same time it's a great thing to see that actually, you know, there's a very vibrant market for different types and styles, and that's very exciting for anyone thinking about looking at getting an electric cargo bike, because there will be one out there that meets your needs.
Yeah. I think one of the sort of topics we shouldn't dance around too much is the environmental aspects of eCargo bikes. Now, we know that they're wonderful because they are potentially removing fuel burning cars or vans off our road, which increases air quality and even the health and well-being aspect as well. Maybe for families who are transporting their children on the school run in a cargo bike rather than driving in a car. There's many fantastic things about eCargo bikes, but one of the things which I know might also be on the mind of some potential users are the batteries, and the how environmentally friendly the use of these batteries are. This is perhaps a little bit of a technical question, but would anybody like to talk about where batteries come into this environmental argument at all?
Go on then, I'll pick this up. I think it's sorry, Mark. It's a really important issue, and there's a huge project going on at Raleigh with regards, you know, not just e-bikes and batteries, but bikes in general. You know, it's it's kind of an interesting thing, because you're right, the product that we sell and the end product and how it's used is extremely environmentally friendly and has lots of benefits, both health and well-being and environmentally. But the supply chain of the bicycle industry is perhaps not so environmentally friendly, and it's something that is a huge project for us and other manufacturers. So currently we have a battery recycling scheme, and we are looking at other ways to repurpose those batteries, as many car manufacturers do. So second life options, recycling the various parts of the batteries. But I think equally, while it should be a consideration, I think it's also important to remember that most of the batteries have a life of, a minimum of 5 years, and the technology in the last 5 years has come on leaps and bounds, and will continue to do so, with the amount of manufacturing resources required to produce the batteries is reducing dramatically. So we're in a good position. As an industry, I think we're all on a journey to improve that sort of next bit, whether it's a second life or recycling the batteries. But batteries last a significant amount of longer time than they used to. So.
Yes, Mark.
I guess, yeah, it does bring up an issue. I think, Ed, you and I have spoken about it in the past, actually, is what happens to the batteries afterwards. And for families, it's quite straightforward. They can take them to their local authority recycling centre, as I understand it. We have come across issues with it from a commercial perspective. It's great that Raleigh obviously now doing a recycle programme. We know some major motor manufacturers are, as a bike shop, we are sometimes left with those batteries if there's been, a warranty issue, for instance, and we're acutely aware of what happens to those batteries afterwards. They sit in the back of a cupboard for a long time, or do we recycle them? And I think that there isn't really a consensus, it feels like, yet, and we have those concerns, particularly if you're a commercial person. You pick them up, and you picked up an eCargo bike, it comes to 5 years down the line, what happens to that battery? It feels like, in some respects, the industry hasn't quite caught up yet with what to do with the batteries. It's sort of not really thought about, because it's something in the future. And so I think we're already having those slight concerns when we've dealt with other commercial partners about it. It's like, what do we do with the batteries? It's fantastic that Raleigh are recycling them. That's a very straightforward way of dealing with it, and you get that support afterwards with the manufacturers. I think it's a definite consideration. It should be thought of at the point that you get the bike, not 5 years down the line when you're left with a stack of batteries. Let's say you've got 4 or 5 bikes, and they're just going to sit there in a cupboard, and they are lithium batteries as well, and they have to be treated with care at the same time, and they should be charged in controlled conditions, for instance. So they're all considerations, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. They are considerations, and the industry is very much developing at quite a rapid rate in terms of battery development, isn't it? So hopefully more solutions come up in the future. Jenny. Yeah,
I mean, just to add to that, I saw something last year about using old batteries as storage for energy, so that even when it can't be used sort of on the bike, there is potential for it to be sort of used as a energy storage or energy sink that can then be used to charge other batteries. I mean, I don't know where that's got to, and I don't know much about it, but it's hopeful, I guess, that there is kind of life for the old batteries somewhere until sort of technology advances and we don't need them anymore.
Brilliant. Now, I'm conscious of time. We have 2 minutes until 11, and I know we all want to get on with the rest of our mornings and maybe make ourselves another cup of coffee. So I'd like to finish with a little bit of a sum up from all of you. And one of the great questions that came through actually is, what would be the top messages be for councils to encourage them to get involved and initiate schemes which include eCargo bikes? Can I have something from each of you? Who would like to go first? Mark, brilliant volunteering.
So I think from our perspective and what we've learned through seeing a lot of the tenders out, for instance, for the DFT Energy Saving Trust grants, is really spend some time think of it quite carefully before you jump into which bikes or which schemes you're going to do, and really try and get as much experience and case studies, for instance, of how others have done it, much like this, obviously this webinar, before taking that plunge, because there's so many ways it can be run so well, but there are also pitfalls, and it's about being aware of those, I think, and really looking into them and talking to a breadth of people before jumping in and deciding what the program is and then putting that out to tender, because at that point, if there are issues, they're going to be inherent in how the project is delivered, really. And I think that's really important to get that straight at the beginning.
Who'd like to add on to that? Jenny?
It's going to sound like a complete opposite from what Mark was saying, but I think actually, I completely agree with that. But I suppose also part of me thinks you should just dive in and just buy a cargo bike and see what you can do with it, because I think actually you'll be able to do more with it than you think. And as Mark says, once you've got it, you'll be able to trial it and kind of feel how it works in different use cases. And even within local authorities, actually, there's plenty of things that a local authority does that could be done using the cargo bike, and that might be a place to start.
Jane, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, as Jenny and Mark have said, sort of start off with a bike and see how people want to use it, collect case studies from how people have used it, and then use those case studies to promote the bike, how they could benefit residents, community organisations, businesses, and then hopefully the scheme would then grow organically, and then you can continue to add to your fleet after that.
Absolutely. And anything from you, Ed?
Yeah, I completely agree with everyone. I think definitely getting a cargo bike on the ground in different locations is absolutely fantastic. But I think for me, it's about sharing of information, and I think this platform has actually been really good, and there's been some really good discussions and some great presentations. And if we can keep sharing the information and data and experiences that we've had in different locations and different scenarios with the use of cargo bikes, it's only going to be positive for everyone.
Absolutely. We're all here to collaborate, aren't we? And that's what, like we said, that's why we need to share this information. I'll wrap it up there. I hope we've all heard something that we can take away today. And of course, for everyone in the audience, if you'd like to listen again to the webinar, it has been recorded and you'll all have access to that through a link which will be sent to you all shortly. So thank you to all of the speakers today, and of course to Landor Links and Raleigh UK for hosting. The final thing I'll end on is that obviously we need to share our growing knowledge as much as possible. And I think webinars like these are very much the tip of the iceberg. So hopefully we can share knowledge in person sometime in the near future as well. So thank you all for joining us, and see you all soon.